We're going to be reading our little book together. This is Fireflies. Everybody should have this book. If you haven't picked up your work from school yet, you might not have this book. If so, wait until you get it and you can read along with me. When we look at the very front cover of this book, we can see the title, Fireflies, and we can see the author, Rhonda Jackson. This book has photographs in it, pictures taken with a camera, so we don't have an illustrator listed. This is a factual story. It is a real true story that is teaching us things about fireflies. So for a minute, I want you to think about fireflies. If you've ever seen a firefly before, what does it look like? Or maybe you've seen them just in stories before, not in real life. I'm going to list a couple things that I already know about fireflies. I usually see fireflies in the summer by my house, so I know that. I don't see them in the winter or when it is colder outside. In fact, it has to be pretty warm for a couple days to see the fireflies. And I usually see them when it just starts to get dark, so right after sunset. All right, and that might be because I'm not usually outside in the middle of the night, but I might still be outside after sunset or, right when it's starting to get dark, I see fireflies around. What else do I know about fireflies? They light up. And they might not stay lit up all the time. They don't glow all night. But they kind of blink. They light up and then they turn off, and they light up and they turn off. And I know that they're small. They're not huge bugs flying around. They're smaller. So those are some things that I already know about fireflies. Even before I read this story, you might know some of those things about fireflies, or maybe you know something different about fireflies that you can tell someone at your house. But when we read this story together, Fireflies, we are going to learn more about them, and maybe we will be able to add some new things about fireflies that we know. All right, so let's go through our story about fireflies and see what we can figure out. What kind of animal is a firefly? So it starts off with a question. We have a question mark at the end and an asking word at the beginning for what kind of animal is a firefly. Think about what we've learned about animals. Is a firefly a fish? Is it a mammal? Is it a reptile or amphibian? So a firefly, they're going to tell us down below, doesn't belong to those groups. Let's read about it. It's not really a fly. A firefly is a beetle, but it's a very special kind of beetle. Fireflies are also called lightning bugs. That's because they light up or glow at night. The end of the firefly glows bright yellow and green. Fireflies send messages to each other with their lights. That's something special that we could add to our chart, that the fireflies light up to send messages to each other. So it's their way of communicating by blinking their lights. A firefly is black with 2 red spots on its head. It has a yellow stripe on its wings and head. A firefly rests upon plants and trees during the day. We've talked about this word upon before. Yesterday in our reading story we had it. It means on top of. This shows us a close-up view of what a firefly looks like. We can see the colors. We can see it kind of has this hard shell covering. That, remember, it's a type of a beetle. We can see its antennae and its legs. Oops, we lost the whole book. Fireflies have a life cycle like many insects. Females lay their eggs under the ground in the spring. The larvae in the eggs can already glow. Sometimes the eggs light up. So here's a picture showing us an egg. And it says even when the firefly is inside the egg, it can sometimes glow or light up. The larva crawls out of the egg in about 3 weeks. It's hungry. What does the larva eat? The larva looks for snails and worms to eat. So this picture shows us the larva. That's kind of a fancy word for the baby firefly. When it goes through different stages and it changes, one of those is called larva. So it's able to eat, and it eats snails and worms. Have you ever heard of a glowworm? A glowworm is another name for a firefly larva. A firefly larva looks like a worm, and it can glow. So here you can see the end of it is able to glow. The larva gets cold during the fall and winter, so it digs deep in the ground. The soil keeps the larva warm. In the spring, the larva starts to build a mud house. The larva develops into a pupa. So the next stage that the firefly goes through when it changes is called a pupa, and this is pretty much a whole year after it has hatched out of the egg. The pupa changes into an adult firefly in about 10 days. The new firefly is ready to fly and eat. Some fireflies eat nectar from a flower. Some fireflies eat other insects. So this is what the adult firefly looks like. It has changed again, and we know that it can eat nectar and it can eat other bugs. Fireflies fly around damp places all summer. You may see them by a pond or a stream. Look closely. Do you see anything? Are tiny lights twinkling in the trees? Are fireflies dancing in the grass? All right, so at the end of our story, it gives us some ideas of things that we can talk about and what we learned in our story. We're going to go back and add to some things. I erased part of it with the book here. Remember, before I had said some things that I knew about fireflies, that I see them in the summertime, usually around sunset when it's starting to get dark, and that they light up, and that they're small. But now thinking back, I can add some other things to this list, some things that I learned while I was reading about fireflies. I can add, let's see, we can add the different stages. We can say that they start out as an egg, and then they are a larva, and that some people call the larva glowworms because it's more in the shape of a worm than a beetle. Then it changes and becomes a pupa. Then it becomes an adult firefly. We know some of the things that it eats. It eats nectar from flowers, and it eats other insects. I learned that it can make a mud house during the fall and winter. When it gets too cold, it can hide and make a mud house. So there's lots of cool things about fireflies for us to learn. When we put in order how the firefly changes and grows, we can go back and see all the different ways that it changes and how it grows. I think I spelled adult wrong here. I forgot the L. There it is. So when we put those things in order, it helps it make a little bit more sense to us, and we can think about how long it takes the firefly to grow and change, and how it looks when we see it might be very different than how it looks when it first started out. All right, so you are practicing this story, Fireflies. You can go back and read it again with me if you want to play the video again. If you want to practice reading it to somebody at your house, that is what you should be doing over the next few days. Some of you have this book about ladybugs that you should also be practicing on your own, and you can flip to the back and talk to somebody at your house about what happened at the beginning, what happened in the middle, what happened at the end, and answer some of those questions. And some of you have this story about honeybees, and you can do the same thing. Practice reading this with somebody at your house and flip to the very back and tell some of the things that happen as a honeybee grows. Okay? So for the next couple days, you should be practicing reading Fireflies and your other stories.